Hello and good afternoon, everybody, and welcome. Thank you for taking the time to join us today on this edition of the Diversity and Inclusion Chat Series. Rangam and Sourceable have started these weekly talks and events on LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter that highlight the need for greater representation of people with disabilities, neurodiversities, and autism in the workplace. We wish you all would join and encourage others to join for these events and give a voice to the segment of our society that is underrepresented in the workforce. Today, we are going to be talking about inclusion and its importance. Introductions times. I am Chandramouli Dhara, Director of Social and Digital Marketing and a student of diversity and inclusion, and I learn every day. My guest today is a leading voice in the disability and inclusion space, a TEDx speaker, and a disability rights advocate recognized by the Government of India and various private institutes with multiple awards. I'm truly honored to introduce our guest, Ms. Anita Iyer, founder, sponsor, and managing trustee of EKansh Trust, Pune. Anita is passionate about creating a holistic journey to inclusion. Good afternoon, Anita ji. Thank you for joining us for this chat.
Good
There is
afternoon, Dhara.
no way anyone can do justice to all that you do in the 2 or 3 lines that I said. So please tell us something about yourself, your journey, and how Ekansh came to be.
Thank you for that introduction. It is going to be difficult actually to cover everything that we have tried to do and everything that still remains to be done. There's just so much that is left to be done still, but we have begun the journey with talking about how to begin from the beginning. Like I also spoke to you just before the interview began, I'm extremely passionate about seeing how we can begin with prevention, detection, and early intervention where disabilities are concerned. And like that song, let's start at the very beginning. It's a very good place to start. Yeah, from Sound of Music. So I
Mhm.
believe that actually applies even to the work that we do. So let's begin at the very beginning. So we talk about prevention, detection, and early intervention with people who are in the slums and in urban and rural areas through the Anganwadi workers, etc., through the Anganwadi network that we have, which is an amazing network that India has. Through them, we try and reach students with disabilities across the state and even outside. The next step, of course, is inclusive or integrated education, where I believe that children with and without disabilities must study together, must learn together. It is not just about academics. It is also about life skills. And when we say life skills, it is not only about how we feed ourselves or how we, go about our everyday activities. It is also about how we interact with others and the kind of respect we give others, the self-esteem that we ourselves have. I mean, it is about, if you are kind to somebody else, that other person cannot be unkind to you. That is what you get back from being kind, teaching your children kindness. There is this poster that is going around which says that it is not our job to teach our children to cope with bullying and discrimination in society. It is our job to bring up children who will not bully and who will not discriminate. So my work has always been outside in. How do we sensitize people without disabilities about the challenges that people with disabilities face? How do we not put up barriers between people with disabilities and success, however you may want to define it? So whether it is barrier-free architecture, or it is adaptive clothing, or it is even about the stories that we put out there. There is storytelling has become so very popular now. So my question is, are your storytelling sessions inclusive of persons with disabilities? Do you have a sign language interpreter? Do you have subtitling? Also the content of the stories. So when you speak about my work, very recently we had a competition in short story writing for people who are visually challenged. Only people who are visually challenged were allowed to participate, and one of the main conditions or prerequisites was that they cannot use visual cues. Because most of our poetry, even if you look at a nursery rhymes, it's about twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder what you are. Up above the world so high, it's all visual. And we had a similar competition earlier, and this was held, the second one was held very recently. The second one was triggered by a friend sending me a link which said, oh, Harry Potter has now been published in Braille. And my question was, do you realize how hyper visual that movie is and those books are? There are things that are disappearing and changing shapes. It's all about visuals. And you translated that and you publish that in Braille, but will they get the content of the book? Will they get the story? So the story also has to be accessible to the person with a disability, not just the storytelling or the book itself, right? So it's
Mm-hmm.
about looking at everything very holistically. So everything that we do, are we doing it in a holistic way? Are we doing it in an inclusive way? Like today, a little boy asked me, "Madam, subtitles hain, so they will be able to read, na, even if they are hearing impaired." I said, "So you have assumed that they can read English subtitles. Number one, you assume that they know English. Number two, that they can read. So English itself is not spoken by almost more than 90% of our population. So having English subtitles may not be the right, solution to accessibility for people who are hearing impaired, at least in our country. So looking at things holistically, I think is what EKansh Trust does. We had also conducted 3 job fairs in Pune for persons with disabilities. They were successful in terms of numbers, but as far as placements were concerned, we realized that a lot more effort has to go into training and skilling of candidates before we get into, you know, placing them in a big way.
Mm-hmm.
So this is just a little introduction to what we do. We've done a lot more. We've even, yeah, one more thing that I'm very proud of that we have done is to put up this accessible equipment for children with disabilities in a public park. So there is actually a swing on which a wheelchair can go. There's a merry-go-round that can take a wheelchair. You have these abroad, but in India, it's not very common. I think there are about 2 or 3 gardens only. And this is a public park, so that children with and without disabilities can play together. So these are the changes that we are trying to make: perception, inclusion, and engaging with persons with disabilities every day and everywhere.
Very true. I mean, as you rightly said, everybody has a different view of accessibility. Everybody's disability does not, it's not universal. People who are providing accessible solutions also need to understand that all disabilities are not universal. If you have, as you rightly said, if you have captions, that doesn't mean everybody will be able to understand. So accessibility is supposed to be universal in how it is provided, and we need to get out of that thinking that one size fits all or one shoe fits all for everything. So what are your thoughts on inclusion, and where do you see inclusion except for workplaces? Where else would you like to see inclusion being made a priority for the people with disability?
Uh, if it is a priority everywhere, then it will also happen in the workplace. So even when I conduct my sensitization sessions for employers, and when they come to me and they say, "Do you have candidates who've done their MTech or chartered accountancy, or especially the IT companies in Pune, which are looking for very good qualifications, very high qualifications." And they come and tell me, "Do you have somebody who has done their MCA, computer applications?" I ask them, "What have you done?" And they will tell me they've done their MTech. What are your qualifications? So how many classmates did you have with disabilities while you were learning, while you were doing this course? Did you have any classmates that were visually challenged, that were hearing impaired, that were on wheelchairs? So you will get a couple of them saying yes, no, yes, no. So let's ask this question in a different way. Now that the government of India expects that 3% of your employees have to be people with disabilities from this community, did you have 3% people with disability in your classroom? In the park where you went to play? In the temple where you went to pray? At the airports, at the malls, everywhere that you went, did you see the books that you read? Was 3% of the books, the stories that you read? 3% representation of persons with disability should be everywhere so that it happens in the boardroom also. Now, decisions for persons with disabilities are happening in the boardroom, being made by persons without disabilities. Also, there is a fight where people with disabilities are saying nothing about us without us. While I'm completely with them, I also believe that every opinion has to be an informed opinion or an informed suggestion. Just as I cannot speak for all women who are my age or all women of India, one person with a disability may or may not be qualified or well informed enough to speak for persons with different disabilities. Like a wheelchair user may not understand what are the needs of a person who's visually challenged, and vice versa. So we need informed people who are making decisions. From Again, that has to be inclusive. In the sense, we have to understand that a person with hearing impairment who has an informed opinion to give or a suggestion to give should be a part of the decision making team. So you have to have an informed team that is making decisions. Simple representation will not do. It has to be an informed representation, a qualified, educated representation from the sector.
Yeah, I mean, experience is the experience teaches everybody. As you said, if you never interacted with somebody who is having a disability, you have never even tried to understand their point of view by talking to them, or actually, I don't say walking in their shoes, but trying to understand what all difficulties they face. There is no way you can sit in a corner office and make a decision that actually, I mean, the intention might be correct, but then the application has to be also correct for it to be, functional. So I agree with that, and that's the right way. That's the right way. I mean, with 3% being mandated, if it happens, then that's when everything works. Otherwise, it's just then stays on a piece of paper, and it's just something that everybody likes to show. There are a lot of preconceived notions about PWDs that hold back their progress. I feel there are a lot of preconceived notions that people come up with. People who are neurotypical or people who are able, they have a variety of things that they think, and they stay in their boxes, and they don't move out of it. Uh, how does EKansh endeavor to change all this? What does EKansh do to make sure that these notions are changed?
I have also learned a lot in my entire journey. Let me be very honest. I didn't begin with knowing everything. Uh, the only thing that I'll give myself credit for is the fact that I was open to understanding and changing my mind, and doing so openly, without fear and without any embarrassment. This is one thing that I would like to tell everybody, that there is no embarrassment in saying I don't know and learning, because then you look foolish only for that point of time when you're saying you don't know. If you don't admit it, then you're being silly for life. So it's always nice to learn, to be corrected, and then say, hey, I learned. That's a big thing, right? That is what human beings are supposed to do. We're
Yeah.
supposed to evolve.
Hmm.
So we learn. So there are many things that I learned, positive and negative. One is that every person with a disability is an individual, just like any of us. I cannot and I will not be clubbed with all 54-year-old Iyers from Palakkad. No, I am different. Similarly, every person with autism is different. Every person with cerebral palsy is different. So it is not for us to decide what a person with cerebral palsy or what a person with autism can do until we have met them. And even before we meet them, unless we have given them full opportunity to explore what they can become. Again, beginning at the beginning. It is wonderful that we are trying to fix what has already gone wrong through reservations, through this 3% reservation for persons with disabilities. It's great because we're trying to correct what went wrong earlier, but we should not perpetuate it. It has turned into a business where we are skilling and placing and skilling. Why do you have to skill a 21-year-old if you've begun skilling at 3 years of age when the child enters kindergarten? Begin then like you do with everybody else, so that a graduate will have a certain amount of efficiency, and you will already know by the time the person is 21 or say 24 that this is what the person is capable of, and these are the kind of jobs that that person can apply for. How much hand holding does a candidate without disability need, and how much hand holding are we having to do with a person with disability, and why? If that hand holding had happened earlier from the beginning, would we have to do so much now? So while I request most companies that while HR can look at employing persons with disabilities, the candidates now, CSR must definitely look at investing at least half of what they do for skilling these candidates into skilling children beginning from 3 years of age. So look at prevention, detection, early intervention, early education, and allow that to then flow. Also have more parks where children can play together. Then people like me don't have to go out and sensitize 30, 40, 50-year-old CEOs and HR executives. We are doing it now because it didn't happen in the past. But let us correct that. If you start sensitizing children, then you don't have to sensitize adults of the next generation. So this is something that I learned. Also let me tell you that there is a lot of anger among. I see a lot of parents of children with autism and other disabilities who are angry that society does not understand their kids. I would like to remind them that most of us are ignorant till the disability touches us. 20, 30 years ago, probably the parent also did not know. So the onus is also on parents to go out and sensitize more people. Make people understand what is autism. Talk about it. Talk about it freely. Take your child to the park. Let people see your child with the stimming, with all the other behavioral challenges that a child may have. Let people see and understand that this is because of autism. If we do not allow our children to go out, others will never understand. These are all things that I have learned. That this anger comes from thinking people don't understand me, but I never explained why to you. If you wonder why I am a certain way, you must give me an opportunity to explain why. So this is very important. Conversations around disability are extremely important and they must happen more freely. So that is why EKansh has a park, we have storybooks, we have coloring pages, and now we have a coloring competition for children where we're inviting children to draw and send in pictures of people with disabilities in different empowered roles. Let children start thinking inclusive from this age onwards so that we don't have to sensitize adults in future. That is the way I'm moving now. That has become my focus now.
And it has now, I mean, Nish, our CEO, keeps on saying this, and I feel I also have come to realize we all know somebody who has a visible or an invisible disability. We all know them. It's just the level of acceptance that is needed. And I think we spoke earlier when we were talking before this little interview that it is not about sympathy, it is about empathy. Empathy is all about, empowering and taking action. Sympathy is just words, you say a couple of good words and a few sentences and then you move on. So I feel you are very correct in saying that we should start at the beginning. We should make sure that people we are interacting with, we are empathetic to what they're going through, and that comes through. That is going to be a gradual process. I mean, a 20-minute conversation is not going to change anything, but I feel these type of conversations are very important, and these are the conversations that actually help, and those people who are listening in and those people who are going to listen afterwards also. So what are the biggest challenges that you see people with disabilities face when it comes to employment, workplaces, or even working? It doesn't matter if it's like in India, we have this concept of white collar jobs, blue collar jobs. A job is a job. It doesn't matter if you are sitting at a desk coding or standing at it doing a drama or singing a song. If you got to do something and if you are able to do something, it's a job. So what are the biggest challenges people with disabilities face when it comes to going to workplaces?
I think in India, the biggest problem is, to put it briefly, itna to kiya. Whether it is education, whether it is employment, whether it is accessibility, assistive technology, kam se kam itna to kiya. At least they have begun. The moment I tell them, hey, listen, अभी इसको ब्रेल में लिख दिया है हैरी पॉटर को, अरे इतना तो किया. पहले तो we never got braille books. We never had braille books earlier. Wow, Harry Potter is now published in braille. At least they have done so much. And I'm like, okay, now, so what does that mean actually to a person who's visually challenged? Like I also told you about that conference that I went to, where 3 of us were supposed to speak, and each of us was given 20 minutes. You give a person who's visually challenged 45 minutes to speak, and you give the others 5 minutes or 10 minutes to speak because they don't have a disability. We forget that thin line between empathy and sympathy. And equal opportunities is being redefined over and over again. All of a sudden today, the Supreme Court has said that even for promotions, persons with disabilities have reservations. And I'm saying you have to, when will you come to a level where those reservations are taken away and everybody moves ahead in terms of merit, based on merit? It has to be based on merit at some point, because if it's a commercial organization, don't expect them to do charity. Don't expect them, it's about making money. It's about economy, right? So there is a difference between charity and equality. There is a difference between sympathy and empathy. We haven't gotten there yet. We have not defined the terms very clearly for ourselves. So that is why we keep mixing up. So itna to kiya. At least we did this much has to change to whatever you do well and do completely to the best extent possible. It's very difficult every time to get it 100% right, but I think that is a major problem that is faced by persons with disabilities in India, where we don't do our best. We just do as much as we can cosmetically, and then we move on. I think that has to come.
Bare minimum is where we stand on. And
yes.
This is not a critique of where there are organizations that are doing a lot more than they're supposed to do, but then they fall into the minority. I mean, I expect or my hope is that we come to a point where at least half the organizations are doing more than what they're supposed to, and the rest of the half are learning from them. That actually will change the balance. And whenever anybody does mandated minimums, it is not from the heart. I personally feel that if the Supreme Court, if the central government or somebody has to come and say, you know what, this is mandated, this 3%, then it becomes again reservation, and it becomes an entirely different topic, and the conversation goes off the rails. Of the entire purpose of the conversation is lost. So that's what I feel. But
I agree.
I hope that it changes. I'd like to know about training, about what role does, I mean, everybody expects the individual to be trained who has a disability. He or she should know this skill, he or she should have this skill. This person needs to know how to type this fast. But what about training the employers? What about training the people who are going to be working in teams which are trying to accept these people with disabilities? What role does training have for employers and managers in the workplace?
More than training, I think sensitizing works, because making people, like I said a little earlier, that knowing that you don't know everything and that everybody is an individual. So expecting that some NGO or some organization will walk in and tell you exactly how to treat all the candidates with autism. From tomorrow onwards, we have given you this magic formula which you will use and everything will work. No. And allowing them to know that Jugaad is a huge thing in India and we use it for all the wrong stuff. This is where we have to use Jugaad. Where when you meet somebody with a disability, apply it to that person to see what best you can do for that person to be able to function efficiently. So we have always believed that even before we do access audits, I talk about sensitizing. First, it is sensitization, which is why if you look at the EKansh Trust logo, it says awareness, acceptance, sensitization, finally inclusion. Don't include and then wonder what to do with the candidate, or to do with the student, or to do with your classmate. Begin with awareness, not only of what the individual can do, the candidate can do, but also what your limits and limitations are, what the potential is for that person to grow in your organization, in terms of capacity of the candidate and your own capacity to include, and make things accessible for them and then include them, so that nobody is stuck, neither the candidate nor you. It is very difficult to ask a person with a disability, a candidate with a disability, or an employee to leave, saying, hey, you're not efficient, or saying, hey, I'm not ready for you. You can't say that after 3 months. So make sure that you have everything in place and you're properly sensitized before you accept somebody with a disability. I think that is most important, and to start small. Not to play the number game, please, because the number game is the worst thing that has come into employment of persons with disabilities. Let's look at individual success stories. If we have changed one life well, we have done a lot. It's not about 300 people in a cafe or 300 people in a supermarket. Out of those 300 people, there were at least 30 who could have been rocket scientists. Why didn't they get there? Those are the questions we need to ask ourselves and begin at the beginning.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, I mean, as you rightly said, it has to be individualized. Accessibility, ability to understand every individual with disability. Like me and you, we both are not same. So we should not think that two people who are visually impaired are going to be the same. It might work for one person and it might not work for the other person. So as you rightly say, Jugaad has to be applied. You got to think outside the box, and you got to be able to experiment. I understand businesses do not have time to do that, but the little time they invest into experimenting and creating policies around individuals that they come through will, I think that will be far more effective than just putting everybody in one box and saying, okay, visually impaired get this and this. That doesn't work. I understand. I know we are running out of time, and I want to respect everybody's time. We are getting close to it, and there is a lot of conversation that I want to have with you, and there are a lot of things we spoke about earlier also, but I'm not touching them right now. But I wanted to know, tell us something which is like a personal success story, or a success story that EKansh has, where you feel that EKansh has really made an impact, and how it has changed course. It doesn't matter if it's an organization or an individual, because end of the day, that is what we and you are trying to do, and I just want to learn something from you.
So I'm going to contradict myself now. This happens in every interview, but I'll have to do it. Just in terms of sheer numbers, we have made a difference. Because just the kind of people that we have managed to touch through our adaptive clothing efforts, there were 50 teams from all over India, from fashion design schools participating. Each team had at least 4 or 5 members. So you can imagine that scale. Through the story writing sessions that we are having, through the drawing books, through the story books, the coloring pages, our garden, everything, that even the architecture competition that we had, all the NASA workshops that I have done with students of architecture. We are trying to touch every section of society. We are not only talking about employers and employees, how do we place? I have made it a point that I will not have only one focus. My focus is everybody. I think everybody can make a difference. So just today, I met a boy who's a friend's son who plays squash. I asked him, can we get a few people with disabilities to watch you playing squash? Many of them have not even heard of squash as a sport. And I don't think India has a para squash team. I don't think so. I was trying to Google it up. My point is, everybody can make a difference. That is why it is called EKansh. Each of us is a part of the whole, right? And the whole has to be bigger than the sum of its parts. So the main contribution I think EKansh has made is just sheer numbers of the number of people that we've spoken to, even through our Anganwadis. One Anganwadi worker is 1,000 families. So that is the kind of scope that we have had in touching mindsets. And I think that has been the most beautiful part of this journey, at least for me.
That's really, empowering. That's really inclusive. That is what the end result has to be, right? It has to be how many lives you touch and how many lives. We cannot change everything. We cannot bring things back or make them right. But I feel that how many people's lives you're impacting, that's amazing. And as I said, this is a very short conversation that we are having, and I don't want to go over. But right now, I'd like to say that we will stay in touch with you, and we will continue this conversation. And hopefully, you will give us some more time, maybe down the line, like a month or two from now. So we'll invite you back, and we'll talk to you a little bit more about this. But right now, I'd like to say thank you for giving your time. Thank you for being so gracious about it. And thank you for accepting our invite at such a short notice. And thanks for joining.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for joining us. And we would like to keep this kind of conversations going. And we will be back again on Thursday next week, and we will have more conversations of this type. Thank you so much, Anita ji. Thank you once again for joining us. Thanks, everybody. Thank you.